Sir, we will start in 1 minute.
Yes.
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Raman Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang. We will have the final session with Raghav ji for 42 select verses of Bhagavad Gita. Meanwhile, I would request Narayan ji to initiate with puja. Sir.
नमो नमः। ओम अच्युताय नमः। ओम आनंदाय नमः। ओम गोविंदाय नमः। शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्याये सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अयमूर्तसमुसर्दोस्विनन्दो मान्दो लोकनन्दो अयमूर्तसमुसर्दोस्तु तदेव नगरं सदिनं तदेव ताराबलं चन्द्रबलं तदेव विद्याबलं देवबलं तदेव लक्ष्मीपदे दैत्येन्द्रियं स्मरामि। ओम गो ओम भुव ओम सुव ओम मह ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सोदर्ववर्ण्यम भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओमाव ज्योतिर्समृतं ब्रह्मोत्सरम् उमोपात समस्त दुर्गा क्षयत्वाराशि परमेश्वर विचित्तम कर्ष्य मानस्य कर्मण निर्णय प्रसत्त माधव विघ्नेश्वर पूजां कर्ष्ये। पृथ्व्यां निरुद्धुर्षि सुरं चतुर्मो देवता पृथ्वी दिया त्रदा लोकादृतं विष्णु त्रदा त्वं सतारे मां देवी उत्तरं गुरुशासनम् आगमार्थं कृतेमानं कमनार्थं सुरक्षासं खण्डारवं करामि यादव देवदेवानां नमोपात नमस्त दुर्गा क्षयपराशि परमेश्वर की चित्तम निर्बुद्ध सिद्धित्त माधव विघ्नेश्वर पूजां कर्ष्ये। गणानां त्वा गणपतिं हवामहे कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पते आरुष्यलोकसीतानम् अस्मिन्नर्चनाबिन्दे महागणपतिं ध्यायामि महागणपतिम् आवाहयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आसनं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अर्घ्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पाद्यं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः आसनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः औपचारिकस्नानं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये स्नानानन्तरम् आचमनीयं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः वस्त्रदातम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः यज्ञोपवीतार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गंगा धारयामि समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः गंधोपरि अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः अनगणार्थम् अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः हरिद्राकुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि। ओम महागणपतिये नमः पुष्पैः पूजयामि। ओम सूर्याय नमः। ओम एकदंताय नमः। ओम कपिलाय नमः। ओम गजगणगाय नमः। ओम लंबोदराय नमः। ओम दिगड़ाय नमः। ओम गिरिधराजाय नमः। ओम विनायकाय नमः। ओम धूमकेतवे नमः। ओम गणाध्यक्षाय नमः। ओम बालचंद्राय नमः। ओम गजाननाय नमः। ओम वक्रतुंडाय नमः। ओम सूर्पकर्णाय नमः। ओम हेरंबाय नमः। ओम स्कंदमूर्धवाय नमः। ओम सिद्धविनायकरे नमः। ओम शंकरमोक्षविनायकरे नमः। ओम आतुपुरविनायकरे नमः। ओम महागणपतिये नमः। नानाविधपरिमलपत्रपुष्पाणि समर्पयामि। धूपार्थं समर्पयामि। दीपार्थं समर्पयामि। अक्षतां समर्पयामि। ओम भूर्भुवः स्वः प्रसन्नामि अमृतं युषा। ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा। ओम अपानाय स्वाहा। ओम ज्ञानाय स्वाहा। ओम उदानाय स्वाहा। ओम समानाय स्वाहा। ओम ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। नाट्यचक्रे नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि। मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि। अमृतं सूत्राकुसुं समर्पयामि। कर्पूरं समर्पयामि। गणानां गणपतिं नमामि। कविं कवीनामुपमश्रवं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पते आनुष्ठुप्सीतानं। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। ओम भूर्भुवस्सुतस्वधर्मं भर्गोदेवस्य प्रचोदयात्। प्रचोदयात्। स्वाहा 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 स्वाहा। गणपति समर्पयामि। पुष्पं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरमास्मदीयं समर्पयामि। ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। महागणपतिये नमः। महागणपतिये नमः। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गणपति प्रसादं सरसा कृणामि। ओम भो ओम भुव ओम सुव ओम वः ओम जन ओम तव ओम सत्यम ओम तत्सदुर्भवणीयं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। ओम अवज्योतिर्समृद्धं पुरुषस्वरम्। होमोपात समस्त दुर्गा शतवारासी परमेश्वर प्रीत्यर्थम शुभे शोभने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण द्वितीय परार्थे श्रीवेदे पराकल्पे वैवस्वत मन्वन्तरे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे प्रथमे वादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे वर्धखण्डे मेरु दक्षिणे पार्श्वे सगाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने व्यावावृके प्रवादिना अस्या संवत्सराणां मध्ये शुभकृतनाम संवत्सरे दक्षिणायने वर्ष ऋतु सिंहमासे अवणिमासे कृष्णपक्षे चतुर्थ्यां सुमदितौ भानुवासरयुक्तायां मृगशीर्षनक्षत्रयुक्तायां शुभनक्षत्र शुभयोग शुभकर्ण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायाम् अस्यां दशमी तिथियां शुभतिथौ मम जन्मापपर्यन्तं मध्ये सम्भावितानं सर्वेषां पापानां सत्यापरणार्थम् अस्माहं सहकुर्माणं क्षेमसद्धर्य वीर्यविजय आयुरारोग्य ऐश्वर्याणाम् अभिवृद्ध्यर्थं समस्तमङ्गलाभ्यर्थं समस्तदुर्गोपशान्त्यर्थं रमणमहर्षेः प्रसादेन ज्ञानवैराग्यसिद्ध्यर्थं श्रीरमणमहर्षेः पूजां करिष्ये तदङ्गं कलशपूजां च करिष्ये। विघ्नेश्वरं यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि भवनार्थे क्षेमाय पुनरागमनाय च करदस्य मुखे विष्णुखण्डे रुद्रसमाजित मूले तत्र सिद्धितो ब्रह्मा मातृगणे समृद्धा कुशौ तु सागरः सर्वे सप्तद्वीपा वसुन्धरा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदो सामवेदपदातरुण गंगे च सन्निधि गोदावरी सरस्वती नर्मदे सिन्धु कावेरी जलेस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु अङ्गे च चैता सर्वे करसाम्ब समाचरिता आयान्तु देवपूजार्थं दुर्दशकारः तंबूरा सागरोत्पन्नो विष्णु विष्णु करे देवे से पूजित स्वरीपांजलि नमोस्तुते देवो देवालय प्रोक्त जीवन देव स्नान अंजान निर्माल्यम सोयाम भवने पूजये ओम सकल गुणात्म शक्तियुक्ताय योग पीडात्मने नमः आधार शक्तिये नमः मूल प्रकृतिये नमः आदिवराय नमः आदिगुरुमाय नमः आनंदाय नमः पृथ्व्यै नमः आदित्यादि नवग्रह देवताभ्यो नमः दश दिग्पालेभ्यो नमः गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात् पर ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठा मंत्रस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरेकिति सामधर्माणि संधांसि सकल जगत् स्थिति सम्मार्गारणि प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिम शक्ति रोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आमंगुष्टाभ्यां नमः हरिगर्जिनीभ्यां नमः क्रोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आमनाभ्याभ्यां नमः हरिहर्षिकाभ्यां नमः क्रोम कर्दलपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं शिरसे स्वाहा क्रोम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायं हरिं नेत्रदाय वसट क्रोम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वस्रवि दिग्बंध ध्यानम रक्तांबोधिस्थ बोधोस्थ तरणसुर कराब्चे पासं बोधंडम इक्षुतमणिगुण पंचबाणात् प्राणसुखबालं त्रिनसिता प्रियप्तिनसुरत्या देवी बालार्गौर्ना बहुसुग्री प्राणशक्तिपरान ओम हरिं क्रोम क्रोम हरिमां हम यम रम लम वंशम सम्म हंस स्वाम स्वाम हंस अस्यामूर्तौ जीवन्तिष्ठितो अस्यामूर्तौ सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनसस्सस्रोत्र दिव्या प्राणवाक् पाणिपाद वायुस्थानि या कस्ति स्वस्ति सुखं सुरं दृष्टन्तु स्वाहा। ओम अस्य श्री प्राणप्रतिष्ठामन्दस्य ब्रह्मा विष्णु महेश्वरा ऋषिरेकिति सामधर्माणि संधांसि सकल जगत् स्थितिसति सम्मार्गाणि प्राणशक्ति परादेवता आम बीजम हरिं शक्ति रोम कीलकम प्राणप्रतिष्ठापने विनियोग आमंगुष्टाभ्यां नमः हरिंगर्जनीभ्यां नमः रोम मध्यमाभ्यां नमः आमनाभ्याभ्यां नमः हरिंगर्षिकाभ्यां नमः रोम कर्णपुष्टाभ्यां नमः आम हृदयाय नमः हरिं शिरसे स्वाहा रोम शिगाय वसट आम कौसायम हरिनेत्रदाय वसट रोम अस्त्रदाय पट पूर्वस्रवि दिग्बंध असुनीदे पुनरस्माक्ष सक्ष पुनः प्राणनी नोदे भोगम जो पश्य में सूर्य मुच्चरण मन मदे मर्यादस्पति आवाहिदो भव सद्दाहिदो भव सन्निहितो भव सन्निहितो भव अवगुण्डितो भव शुभ्रतो भव शुभ्रसन्नो भव सुमुखो भव वरदो भव प्रसिद्ध प्रसिद्ध स्वामिन् सर्वजगन्नाथ यावत् पूजावसानकं तावत् ध्वं प्रतिभावेन पिण्डेऽस्मिन् सन्निधं कुरु। नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमः श्री कुबेराय नमः नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमः श्री कुबेराय नमः नमो भगवते श्री कुशेलाय नमः कुबेराय नमः चतुर्नो दिवंदन जन पौल सर्वत्र लक्ष्मी प्रदसी मानवद प्रिय ईश्वरा। Now I will recite Bhagwan's Nostotram. All of us can recite along with me or listen to it. श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेव महेश्वरा गुरु साक्षात पर ब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। अपार शक्ति सुखवारी व्यासोरि वशोन्मि मात्रं मूलं समस्तं गुणायिदं तं ब्रह्मं कबीरं चिन्ताविनं हृदि चिन्तयामि। ओम महासेन ओम सेन जाताय नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम गुरवे नमः। ओम अखंड संविदागराय नमः। ओम महुजसे नमः। ओम कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ओम जगच्चिदावताराय नमः। ओम श्री भूमिनादास्तनोतिदाय नमः। ओम पराशर कुलोत्तंसाय नमः। ओम सुंदरातरवत्पदाय नमः। ओम कमनीय सुचारित्राय नमः। ओम सयायाम्बा सयायवते नमः। ओम शोणासुलमोलीन मानसाय नमः। ओम स्वर्णस्तगाय नमः। ओम श्रीमद्वादशान्तमात्रे लब्ध विद्योदयाय नमः। ओम महाशक्तिनिवादेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ओम परमार्थविदे नमः। ओम जिम्बिराय नमः। ओम पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ओम इंदुमोलिना पितृपदे नमः। ओम पितरादिष्ट सोणसहितं प्राप्ताय नमः। ओम तपोमयाय नमः। ओम उदासीनाय नमः। ओम महायोगिने नमः। ओम महोत्साहाय नमः। ओम कुशाग्रदिये नमः। ओम शांत संकल्प संभ्रमाय नमः। ओम सुसुंदरुसे नमः। ओम सवित्रे नमः। ओम स्थिराय नमः। ओम तप शबीद सर्वंगाय नमः। ओम उल्लाम्बुज विलोचनाय नमः। ओम चंद्रिका सदास श्री मंडिदान मंडलाय नमः। ओम सूदवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ओम सूर्यजाक्र विप्रमाय नमः। ओम वेद वेदांत तत्वज्ञाय नमः। ओम चिन्मुत्रिणे नमः। ओम त्रिगुणाधिगाय नमः। ओम विरूपाक्ष गुहावासाय नमः। ओम विराजत सदाकृतिये नमः। ओम उच्चित्त नयनाय नमः। ओम पूर्णाय नमः। ओम रसिदासुर तांडवाय नमः। ओम गंभीराय नमः। ओम परमाचार्याय नमः। ओम सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः। ओम दक्षिणासीनिवाय नमः। ओम धीराय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ओम स्वराजे नमः। ओम महर्षिये नमः। ओम भगवते नमः। ओम ईक्याय नमः। ओम भूम विद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम विमलाय नमः। ओम दीर्घदर्शने नमः। ओम आप्ताय नमः। ओम रुजमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः। ओम समतुसे नमः। ओम सत्यकृते नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रसादाय नमः। ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ओम दयार्णवाय नमः। ओम श्री सोणासुर युरुद्भूत स्कंदासम निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सद्दर्शनोपदेष्टने नमः। ओम सद्भक्त वृंद परिपूजाय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनि प्लिंगेन सेवितां किशोरुवाय नमः। ओम गीतोपदेश सारादि ग्रंथ संसिन्न संशयाय नमः। ओम वर्णासन मुदादीदाय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौम्याय नमः। ओम आत्मवदे नमः। ओम सर्वावनिमनस्तानामाराध्याय नमः। ओम सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ओम आत्मारामाय नमः। ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम मातृमुक्तिविदायकाय नमः। ओम विनदाय नमः। ओम विनुदाय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ओम भावगोज्वलाय नमः। ओम दर्शनादिक संवारणे नमः। ओम मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ओम ऋचादिकर्षादित्याय नमः। ओम स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ओम अंधस्मै घंटांशवे नमः। ओम संसारात्मतारकाय नमः। ओम सोडादिष्टरे नमः। ओम अर्थविद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविच्युत निज प्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गीय महातपसे नमः। ओम कमंडलुराय नमः। ओम सुब्रगविनवसनाय नमः। ओम भुवाय नमः। ओम दंडवाणिये नमः। ओम कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ओम पौरोगपिशक्वराय नमः। ओम स्कंदाय नमः। ओम देवदमाय नमः। ओम अमर्त्याय नमः। ओम सेनानिये नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री कार्तिकाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री मुरुगाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री वल्ली देवाय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री सुब्रमण्याय नमः। नमो भगवते श्री स्वामीनाथने नमः। नमो भगवते श्री दक्षिणामूर्तिये नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नटराजने नमः। नमो भगवते श्री भैरवने नमः। नमो भगवते श्री नंदीभैसुराय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्री शिवपार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। Let us all recite Budesa Saram. Arturajaya Rafade Palam Karma Gimbaram Karma Dajjadam Krihti Mahadado Padana Karanam Palamasaswadam Gadanirodagam Iswararpidam Nechayakrudam Chiddasodagam Muktisadagam Ayavamana Karyamuddamam Bhujanam Java Chintanam Kramat Jagatai Sadi Yugda Sevanam Ashtamurti Deva Bhujanam Uddamastava Ujjamandada Siddhajam Java Dhyanamuttamam Adyadaraya Srodasasamam Saranachintanam Viraladabaram Vedabhavana Sauvamityasau Bhavana Vida Bhavani Mada Bhavasunyasa Bhavasustudi Bhavana Mala Bhakti Ruddhama Irustare Mana Swastata Kriya Bhakti Yoga Bodhacha Nishchidam Vayurodhana Diyate Mana Chala Bhakshiva Loda Sadhanam Siddhavayava Siddhriyayudha Sagayordvai Sakti Mulaga Daya Vinasane Bhuvayarodhane Laikadam Guna Bhavadino Mrudam Pranabandhana Leelamanasam Ega Chintana Nasametyada Nashtamanasot Vishtayogina Prityamaspriyam Swastidam Yada Drishyavaridam Siddhamatmana Chitvadarshanam Tatvadarshanam Manasam Tugim Margane Hrude Naiva Manasam Margarjavat Vriddhayasmaham Vriddhimasrida Vriddhayo Mano Vidyaham Mana Amayam Pudo Bhavati Chinavada Aipadatyaham Nija Visaranam अहमिनासवात् यामहं दया स्फुरधीरस्वयं परमपूर्णसत् इदमहं वदा अभिज्ञमन्वहम् अहमिदीनके अत्यल्यसत्तया विक्रयेन्द्रिय प्राणदीदम नामसे कसत् दज्जडं ससत् सत्ववासिगा चित्ववेदरा सद्दयायिची सिद्धयायाम् ईशजीवयो वेशदीविदा सस्वभावदो वस्तु केवलं वेशानद स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईशदर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्भया आत्मनिष्ठदा ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीनचित् ज्ञानमस्ति किं नादुमन्तरं किं स्वरूपमे आत्मदर्शने अव्ययाभवा अपूर्णसित्सुखं बन्धमुच्यति तं परं सुखं विन्दधीयै इवस्तु दैविक अहमवेदकं निजविभानकं महति तं तवो रमणवागियं महति तं तवो रमणवागियं महति तं तवो रमणवागियम्.
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Raman Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang. We will be having the penultimate session for 42 select verses from Bhagavad Gita by Raghav ji. Sorry, I'm just trying to put Raghav ji on the spotlight. Yes. This concluding shloka is an annex to the 42 Gita shlokas. We will also have a summary of the key message of Bhagwan Ramana Maharishi as reflected in his choices of some of these 42 Gita shlokas. Raghavji, I would now request you to, sir, please lead the session.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः वन्दे श्रीरमणर्षेः आचार्यस्य पदाब्जं यो मे दर्शयदीशं भान्तं स्वान्तमतीत्य पार्थसारथिरूपेण श्रावयित्वा शुभां गिरं पार्थस्याद्य हरो देवः कृपामूर्तिः स पातु नः. Welcome to this session of the Gita, where we see the last shlokas and a summary of the Gita. The song Celestial, as we've seen, is a beautiful collection of the important ideas of the Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavan has strung together these gems from the Gita in a certain coherent fashion to give us the summary and the essence of the Gita. This last shloka, which is a colophon, like an annex to the 42 shlokas, explains that Bhagavan has selected all of these shlokas as a essence, as a collection of the very quintessence of the Bhagavad Gita knowledge. We'll just chant that. to conclude these 42 selected verses. Saroyamiha sarasya Gitaya Subirajate Sangrahito Bhagavata Ramanena Maharshina Saroyamiha sarasya Gitaya Subirajate Sangrahita Bhagavato Ramanena Maharshina Sangrahito Bhagavata Ramanena Maharshina. It has been collected, put together by Bhagavan Sri Ramana. That is the second line. Saroyamiha. This is the very essence of those 700 shlokas, exploring so many topics in the Bhagavad Gita, which, as we saw, is really Vyasa Bhagavan, Bhagavan Sri Veda Vyasa, as it were, channeling Krishna through his mind and composing those shlokas. So there is no, hesitation in admitting that for us, Vyasa and Krishna are one and the same. Their minds are in connection, in resonance, as it were. That is why the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam, counts Veda Vyasa also as an avatara. So there are many lists of avatars in our Puranas. The Dashavatara is just one list. For various reasons, it has become a little popular. But there are other lists of avatars of 24 or even more numbers are mentioned there. And there is no particular reason why those other lists of avatars cannot be regarded as more important. So in those other avatara lists, we have Vedavyasa as a prominent avatara of the Lord. And so Vedavyasa and Krishna were of the same essence. So we need not insist that Krishna spoke actual poetry on the battlefield, a question which perhaps many youngsters or children are liable to ask. Oh, how can you talk for so long and compose poems? Well, it may very well be that Krishna spoke the essence of the message given in what is today called the Bhagavad Gita. But the words which were channeled through Vedavyasa coming to us as this poetic text are the very words of the Lord. That is the tradition, that is the Shraddha. So even if it is true, we accept that in the battlefield, perhaps Krishna gave a summary of this, and perhaps he spoke in prose, not so much in poetry, to Arjuna. Doesn't matter. That same message containing that same truth was conveyed by Krishna to Arjuna. And so that very Gita, again, our Bhagavan Sri Ramana has summarized in the form of these 42 shlokas. Saroyam iha sarasya. It is the essence of the essence. Gita yaha suvirajate. Of the Gita shines forth in this particular work, the Song Celestial. The Song Celestial, therefore, is the essence of the essence. Gita itself is the essence, and these 42 are even more condensed, even more a condensation of those 700 shlokas. That is the meaning of this concluding shloka. So at this point, it will be nice to just see what is the journey that Bhagavan has taken us through these 42 shlokas of the Gita. So if you recollect, at the very beginning, we saw that Bhagavan has placed the shloka conveying the dilemma of Arjuna, the dilemma which each one of us faces almost every day, perhaps. So tam tatha kripaya vishtam ashrupurna kulekshana vishidantamidam vakyam uvacha madhusudana. So tam tatha kripaya vishtam, that Arjuna who was overpowered by sorrow, is the message or situation presented there. It indicates that each one of us, therefore, is with some challenge or the other. As long as there is avidya, there is a challenge. And the greatness and the punya of Arjuna was that he converted what was a topical problem, which could have been dealt with in a very temporary way, by just saying, wake up, we can discuss these ideas later, just fight and we'll see later. He could have either told himself that, or really not inquire deeper. But then Arjuna was special. He had the grace of Bhagavan. And so that topical solution which made him Vishidantam. Vishidantam is one full of Vishada, one who has the sorrow, stricken with very deep-rooted sorrow. Uvacha Madhusudana. Madhusudana then spoke these words. That the topical situation of Arjuna was converted into a very deep inquiry by Arjuna. So we can say a topical situation, meaning a temporary, a minor situation, really speaking, of feeling, yes, I'm in a battlefield, which is not a very pleasant situation, where he had to kill his own distant cousins. And Arjuna has used that to look at himself more deeply, recognize that there was no solution to his problem without Atmajnana. He had an inkling of that. He knew there was no solution from the outside by just manipulating the situation. And so he asks Krishna to instruct him. So that is a very beautiful moment, although it may be very challenging. But each one of us goes through these phases in one's life where the challenges of that situation make us go deeper. We go towards Ishvara when the life outside is challenging. So that is the way the things are. Why can't it always be pleasant? We just pleasantly move towards God or towards the truth. Well, it doesn't happen because we become complacent. Only when there is a challenge, then we move towards Ishvara. So that is the situation there. And Bhagavan himself uses the word Shubhecha. Shubhecha meaning a very auspicious desire arises in us to go towards something deeper, to inquire into ourselves, to inquire into the nature of God. All that will never happen if there is too much punya, if there is too much of a sort of happiness, if there is too much of comfort, then that motivation for self-inquiry won't be there. And so Bhagavan puts that very shloka at the beginning to say, all devotees, we should look upon the challenges in our life as motivators, taking us, pushing us towards Ishvara. And so that's an important shloka mentioned there, saying, Tam tatha kripaya vishtamashru purna kule kshanam vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha madhusudanaha. And once that spirit of inquiry, that spirit of openness to the teaching of the Guru sets in, then something very special happens. Then the grace of Ishvara can be received by us. Our heart opens towards the teaching of Ishvara. Because otherwise, even if the teaching is available to us, we will still not be receptive towards the teaching. We will still not look at the reality as the Guru is looking at it. We will continue to hold on to our notions. Those notions get challenged only when these external situations really shake us. So we can, in that sense, welcome whatever comes in our life, welcome each challenge as an opportunity to practice self-inquiry. And so with that, Bhagavan then plunges into the very heart of the topic, saying that I am that self present in all living beings. I will just adjust the lighting. Yeah, thank you for that. Not sure if it's okay. Okay. Yeah. So then the second shloka is very interesting. Instead of giving many stages in jnana, Bhagavan right away plunges into the very heart of the matter. And so we have Bhagavan explaining that Aham Atma Kshetrajnam Chapimam Vidhi Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata Kshetra Kshetrajnayor Jnanam Yatyat Jnanam Matam Mama. So Bhagavan says that I am that Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, the knower of the body, the knower of the mind. I am that Kshetrajna present in all living beings. So this is like a Mahavakya, where there is an identity between you, the individual, the Kshetrajna who is present here, and Ishvara, saying that Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi. I meaning Ishvara is one with that Kshetrajna, the witness who is present in you. So when we say that God dwells in me, well, God dwells in you, as the very essence of you, He dwells in you. It's not like there is some other presence or being inside you. He is the very truth of what you are. So that is an important shloka conveyed here in the third one of Bhagavan's selection. And then Bhagavan selected what he called one of the most important verses in the Gita. In the 10th chapter, Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutashaya Sthitaha Aham Adincha Madhyancha Bhutana Manta Evacha. So that shloka in the Vibhuti Yoga says that I am Aham Atma Gudakesha. I am the self, O Gudakesha, O one who has triumphed over even sleep. He uses the word Gudakesha, if you recollect, because that witness consciousness which is present in all three states of experience, I am that Aham Atma Gudakesha. Sarva Bhutashaya Sthitaha. I am present in all the different living beings. So Bhagavan says that contrary to what we think, there is only one consciousness. Consciousness doesn't have a plural. So we normally think of different people as though they are having their own consciousness. But then Bhagavan Sri Krishna here says there is only one consciousness and reflecting in the different minds, which are like mirrors. So we use the word upadhi. Upadhi is like an adjunct, a limiting device, as it were. So one consciousness manifests in these different beings. In Sri Bhagavan Sri Ramana's not in the essence. The essence is that very self which is present in you is also the self which is the self of that very tree. And so that is conveyed by this shloka from the 10th chapter. Bhagavan has labeled it the most important or one of the most important ones, because there's one more verse too, which Bhagavan has called the quintessence of the Gita. We'll look at that as we scan through some of the important shlokas here. So, Hamatma Gudakesha Sarva Bhutashaya Sthitaha Hamadincha Madhincha Bhutana Manta Evacha. So, it's one of the important takeaway shlokas. Even if you don't remember all of them, it's nice to know that Bhagavan attached so much importance to this shloka. So, you can keep that in your memory, and chant that. So, that's our homage to our Guru. Then, some of the other important shlokas to be with you. The 7th shloka. So there Bhagavan has now, in this initial unfoldment of these selected shlokas, as I said, we plunge into the very Swarupa, the truth of Atma. So what happens is that the way the Guru looks at the Shishya is that, or the disciple has no real problem. It's not as if the Guru looks at the disciple as an Ajnani. As we know, Bhagavan would say, from the Jnani's perspective, there is nobody who is an Ajnani. And so even if the disciple asks for instruction saying, I am suffering, I am miserable, Bhagavan directly gives the Brahmajnana. He doesn't say, first do some japa, first do a lot of other sadhanas, then one day I will teach you. He doesn't say that. He just cuts to the chase, as it were, and just directly gives the jnana. And that is the magic of the Guru's instruction, that he pulls up the disciple to one level higher. from where your earlier problems don't seem like problems at all. Whatever seemed overwhelming earlier, by the grace of the Guru, you are able to see, okay, I can deal with it. So that is the approach here to Sri Krishna is giving to Arjuna by directly unfolding Atma Tattva as that which is Paramartha, that which is untouched by whatever is happening. And so he gives Arjuna a glimpse of that. Then Arjuna's moha, as we see later, gets destroyed. So this is the beauty of Vedanta, beauty of the teaching of Bhagavan, where we get this higher perspective from which whatever we regard as our dukkha, our suffering, it becomes small. Like they say in this little anecdote, if you want to make a line drawn on a piece of paper small, all you have to do is draw a big line next to it. An informal way of saying the same thing. Here too, we can say, by bringing in the Paramartha Satyam, that Aham Atma, I am that non-dual consciousness, that which gives room for everything to exist, but is untouched by the content of whatever is. So just as a screen is untouched by the fire shown on the screen or projected on the screen, or by the water which is projected on the screen in the form of a movie or a picture, even so consciousness is that very adhisthana, that very basis upon which whatever these experiences you are undergoing are projected, as it were. They are superimposed, and therefore they do not affect the truth of what you are. So Arjuna is being given this very uplifting message, and Bhagavan too therefore has presented the very highest teaching up front, and then the later verses in the Bhagavad Gita selection here will tell us some missing links and some sequential sadhanas. So that is the general approach of the gurus. First give the highest teaching, pull up the disciple to a higher level, as it were, and then the disciple says, yes, I understand, and I would like to also look at some other things in me that are lacking, that are missing. And so then the Guru will say, okay, then these other sadhanas too are to be done by you. So after this shloka, Bhagavan has selected, therefore, the second chapter's 24th shloka, a very meaningful one. We will chant it. Achetyo yamada hyoyam akletyo shoshya evacha Nitya sarvagatasthānuhu achaloyam sanatanaha Achetyo yamada hyoyam akletyo shoshya evacha Nitya sarvagatasthānuhu achaloyam sanatanaha. So a shloka which very powerfully, asserts that the truth of the self is that which cannot be touched by the five elements, which means all of matter, all that is happening around you, to the body, to the mind even. None of it touches the truth of what you are. And so you are nityaha, sarvagataha. So these two words, nityaha, sarvagataha, are again very, very powerful words. They are like words of revelation of the truth of self. They are not describing the self. When we say that consciousness is eternal, Nityaha means eternal. So it's not something we really form a concept about. Eternalness is the very truth of consciousness. Bhagavan has conveyed the same thing very nicely in the Saddarshanam as well. And so we can connect even to that verse. Bhagavan says in Saddarshanam, Bhutam bhavishyatcha bhavat svakale tadvartamanasya vihaya tattvam hasyana kim syat tatava vichacha vinaika sankham ganane valoke. So there Bhagavan says, look, whatever you're calling past and future, they have no existence apart from the present. And so we think we are this little being in time. There is a past, there is a future, and there's a present. Then Bhagavan says, Bhutam bhavishyatcha bhavat svakale tadvartamanasya vihaya tattvam. But apart from the present moment, you have never any direct experience of past or future. When the past was actually experienced, you experienced it as the present moment alone. And when the future will be experienced, it is just the present moment alone. So the present moment alone is the reality. Past and future are mere concepts, mere figments of the mind. All that exists, truly speaking, is only the present moment. And that present moment has no extension in time. It is 0 seconds. The present moment, therefore, is timeless consciousness. Tad vartamanasya vihayatuttam hasyan kim syat gatavaha vicharcha vinaika samkhang ganane valoke. So without the number 1, if I write 1,000,000, all the zeros are meaningless. It's the one that gives meaning to everything else. Even so, Bhagavan says, this present moment awareness, the awareness consciousness, which is always the truth of this present moment, that alone gives reality to both the future as well as the past. In this way, whenever our mind starts brooding over the past or worrying about the future, Bhagavan says, therefore, Atma Vichara means you ignore these thoughts about future is real, past is real, I need to worry. Just take a moment, come back to the present. You will discover that space between the mind, which is creating all the havoc, and you discover that little sliver of happiness, sliver of peace. Sliver meaning a small degree of happiness and peace is discovered in spite of the situation. Then immediately you discover a lot of joy there. Once you know that, hey, all that is happening cannot really touch me. I am this awareness which is in the present moment. I am that which is aware of everything past and future, but I am timeless. I am not a being in time. Time is in me. So this whole spirit is conveyed by just that single word, Nityaha, and Bhagavan is, like I showed, expanded in the Saddarshana. And then we have Sarvagataha, another very meditative word there. Sarvagataha meaning all-pervading. All-pervading doesn't mean that consciousness has gone to different places. When we say consciousness, that is the self, is Sarvagataha. What Bhagavan has intended here is that all that exists is in awareness. All that exists, whether it be the faraway galaxy, it is seen, experienced in awareness, never separate from awareness. No matter how distant an object is, its experience, its reality for you is right here and now. It is in awareness. So we can talk of the sun being far away from the moon, for example, or from the earth. So the sun is some millions of kilometers away from the earth. And then we can say that the moon is separate from the sun. All this is fine. But what is the distance between the sun when you look at the sun or look at the moon? What is the distance between the object, the sun or the moon, that distant object, and consciousness? 0. 0 is the distance. There is no separation between the consciousness, that is the reality, and the moon or any distant object merely experienced in consciousness. So no matter how distant an object is, all that is experienced is in consciousness. Consciousness itself is space-wise unlimited. So just as consciousness is nityaha, time-wise unlimited, that consciousness, which is the self, is space-wise unlimited. It is always experienced here, H-E-R-E, here. So you never experience consciousness there. Whenever you think of the word here, that's consciousness. Here, always you are here. Experience of the moon, here. Experience of the sun, here. The whole universe experienced here and now. And so that here and now are words which are Lakshana words. They are revealing the nature of consciousness. So that is conveyed in this powerful shloka which Bhagavan has selected. Nityaha sarvagata sthanuhu achaloyam sanatanaha. So in this way, the initial part of these 42 shlokas convey the truth of what you are. It uplifts you to a higher paramarthika perspective. I selected a few shlokas to therefore review how the flow of this teaching goes. And then Bhagavan goes on to say that, look, although this Paramartha Satyam is there, nevertheless, when the student says, I cannot immediately abide always in that sadhana or always as the self? What should I do? The student asks that. And then Bhagavan says, you have to follow the teachings of the gurus. There are traditional methods. You can follow that. Don't just go with your own whims and fancies, saying that Advaita is anything goes, everything is Brahman, so sab chalta hai. That is not at all the intention here of Advaita, either by Bhagavan or by Sri Krishna. And so there's a very interesting shloka which conveys this message that one doesn't just violate any Shastra injunctions in the name of Advaita. Instead, when one follows a certain structured path, then it's so much easier and natural to abide as a self. So that shloka is given here, we will read it. Yash shastramiti mutsrujya vartate karma karataha nasa siddhimavapnoti nasukham na param gatim. This is the 14th shloka. So why I selected this in the review is because normally Bhagavan was not really imposing so many restrictions and rules upon the disciples. That is a very beautiful approach which Bhagavan adopted. He would give so much freedom to the disciples that they will discover and take wise decisions with respect to their life and sadhana. There was never any prescriptive approach there. Do this, don't do this, get up in the morning, or if you don't do this, then you go to hell. No such negative injunction anywhere. Bhagavan would uplift the student to a higher perspective, and the student in his wisdom does what is appropriate. And yet Bhagavan always validated the traditional injunctions. Yes, Shastra Vidhi Mutsruja. If a person just randomly violates all the injunctions of the Shastras, which are the scriptures unfolding Advaita, and vartate kamakarataha, just behaves as he likes, saying, oh, I am free, I am enlightened, I just do what I like. So many, modern students who do not have, let's say, a focus on this approach are liable to make that mistake. And so Bhagavan probably foresaw that and included this shloka. And so if they behave as they like, saying, I'm enlightened, so I can do anything, no, that's not correct. Neither will they attain enlightenment, nor are they enlightened. Neither will they get enlightenment in the future. So that's very important, therefore, to stay the course prescribed in the tradition, even while we recognize that all rules are, of course, made for man, not the other way around. But just saying, I am enlightened, so therefore I do anything I like, is not appropriate. That is Bhagavan's message here. There's an interesting incident which I quoted of how Sri Ramanatha Brahmachari, one of the very beautiful and earnest disciples of Bhagavan, was doing the ceremony, the annual ceremony for his departed father. And Bhagavan says, it's okay, you don't have to do this. And when he very clearly asks, is it okay? And Bhagavan endorses him. You have surrendered. He says, you don't have to do this. And so then Ramanatha Brahmachari, in his spirit of total surrender to Bhagavan, doesn't do that ceremony for his departed father. Now, seeing this incident or hearing these words of Bhagavan, another devotee also doesn't do the Nitya Karma or this Shraddha Karma, the ceremony for the departed. Then Bhagavan says, that doesn't apply to you. You should do that ceremony for the departed. That applies only to Ramanatha Brahmachari. He has totally surrendered and his call is different. For you, you have to do it. So Bhagavan gave this very customized instruction. One who has totally surrendered and has that utter reliance only on Bhagavan, living the life of sannyasa, for him, Bhagavan said this is a different rule. He was a brahmachari technically, but it's a different rule for him. But for you, it's wise for you to pursue it, not lazily abandon this important ritual. So that is the essence conveyed here. Bhagavan therefore validated all these scriptural mandates, even while he was very dynamic in its application to different people. So it's a very important point to note. Because we are liable to just let go everything in the name of Advaita. A lot of caution is required there. We shouldn't just do what is convenient, but we should do what is correct. And so this shloka is also one of these 42 selected by Bhagavan. Then in another very important shloka, in the 16th one, Bhagavan goes on to say, Bhaktya tvananyaya shakyaha ahamevam vidhorjuna jnatum drashtum cha tatvena praveshtum cha parantapa. So the initial flow, like I said, first the highest truth of what you are, and then a certain emphasis on the sadhanas have started coming. Because when the highest truth is first conveyed, to abide in the truth, in order to be supportive to that truth, your lifestyle has to conform to a certain pattern. So if a person says, oh, I have glimpsed the truth, now I don't need to do anything, he is violating the right approach there. So Bhagavan therefore says, Bhaktya tvananyaya labhyaha. So what is known as bhakti is fully validated by Bhagavan here. The bhakti word, as we saw, had different connotations. Everything from the use of emotions to relate to Ishvara, down to nididhyasanam is also called bhakti. The highest meaning of the word bhakti, Bhagavan was very fond of quoting from the Viveka Chudamani, which says, Swaswarupa anusandhanam bhaktirityavidiyate moksha samrajya samagryam bhaktireva gadiyasi. Swaswarupa anusandhanam bhaktirityavidiyate, says the Viveka Chudamani. So Bhagavan says the highest meaning of the word bhakti is total love and commitment towards Atma Vichara, Nididhyasanam. And the other meanings are not negated. The other meanings are a stepping stone to Atma Vichara, to Nididhyasanam. So this verse conveys that very meaning. Bhaktya tvananyaya labhyaha. That ananya bhakti is what? Is the final sadhana which conveys and which makes us completely immerse ourselves in the self of self-knowledge. So that ananya bhakti is actually just self-inquiry, another word for self-inquiry, total commitment to self-inquiry. The person has that insight. He has access to what is known as aham sphurana. Do you remember that the two-stage approach which Bhagavan taught in the form of self-inquiry, having these two broad, you can say, phases. So in the same self-inquiry method, initially a person is no doubt dealing with a restless mind. After that, the mind dissolves as the self. If a person is able to get that aham sphurana, where I, pure I, devoid of any ideation, devoid of concepts, is arrived at, that is aham sphurana. Traditionally, it is called the brahmakara vritti. So that is the second phase of sadhana, where a person has access to that aham sphurana. And with that aham sphurana, therefore, he can be totally committed to Brahma Jnana alone, or to the self alone. He can disregard the other sadhanas. He has a luxury, so to speak. Not that he will, but the point is he has now access to self-inquiry in its full depth. And that is conveyed here. That is the highest bhakti, where a person, by having access to this aham sphurana, then still has to practice the sadhana in the form of merely abiding there. The sadhana at this stage is no longer doing something, but just abiding as the self. And then the contrary notions, the viparita bhavanas, the vasanas, the old habits will try to bring in some emotions and some challenges. And that's when he has to stay put. He hasn't to do anything, just stay put with what he sees as true. So that is the second stage, where aham sphurana becomes the basis for the sadhana. The first stage, one has to arrive at aham sphurana. There one has to tussle with the mind to some extent, because my mind will go on into some ideations, then I keep coming back. What is this I? Who am I? What am I? Or a person, if he wishes, can use one of the instructions of Bhagavan for coming back to that I, saying, I am the witness. Any of these ideas are fine, but the idea is to not get carried away by the content of the mind and just to come back to the very I. And that is the first stage. And second stage, the aham sphurana, I thought, resolves as pure awareness. There, the person can now use that as the basis for his sadhana. In the tradition, therefore, the Guru's Upadesha is very important for this aham sphurana to arise. It's not just a technique. So sometimes we might think, oh, Bhagavan has taught a very simple technique. It's not a trick or a technique. It's a very holistic teaching. Many of the things that Bhagavan has said in different contexts need to also be borne in mind. Otherwise, any technique only works when you're dealing with inanimate objects. So there's a technique how to, let's say, operate a mobile phone or operate a car or drive, let's say, a motorcycle. There you can use techniques. So self-inquiry is dealing with the most intelligent being in the universe, which is you, with all the complications and all the complexity. And so to get behind that requires not just a technique, it's a holistic teaching. The holistic Upadesha of Bhagavan is behind Atma Vichara. So it's seemingly a simple method, but there's so much depth to it. Which is why someone will say, oh, I'm not able to grasp onto the I. Then Bhagavan might say, okay, do some japa for a while. Do some japa and then see. So the method and Upadesha of Bhagavan has to be treated in a very holistic way, not just reduced to a technique. So to come back to this shloka, bhaktya tvananyaya labhyaha ahamayam vidhorjuna jnatam drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantapa. So this is an important shloka because from this 16th shloka onwards, Bhagavan explains some sadhanas. So first is the teaching of consciousness as non-dual. You are the very essence of space and time, unlimited in space and time. All time and space is in you. That is the kind of mind-boggling teaching given up front by both Krishna in the Gita as well as Bhagavan in this selection. And then the sadhanas, the intermediate steps are given. So one of the key shlokas is this 16th one. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakyaha ahamayamam vidhorjuna. Shakyaha. There's another shloka, labhyaha. So a similar shloka is there. So here, bhaktya tvananyaya shakyaha ahamayamam vidhorjuna. By this ananya bhakti is it possible to gain the self, to know me as I am and then become one with me. The next shloka is two very significant shloka. It indicates the initiative that you have, the prerogative that you have to assert the truth of what you are. It says, Sattvanurupa sarvasya shuddha bhavati bharata. Shraddhamayo ayam purusho yo yachattasya eva saha. Shraddhamayam purusho, you are of the nature of your beliefs. What you are is defined by what you believe to be true. If you think this is true about you, that's the reality of you. If you think something else is true about you, that becomes the reality for you. So there's a lot of scope for your own self-assertion there, which is why Bhagavan would never encourage any weakness of mind that I am impure. There was one foreign devotee, Mrs. Noy, and she was a little down and a little depressed. And Bhagavan caught the drift of thinking in her mind, and he tells her, there is no room for thoughts, I am impure. So probably she felt like that she's impure or whatever it meant for her. And Bhagavan says, give no room for such thoughts that you are impure. Assert the truth, be with the self. So Bhagavan's teaching was always to not give way to any kind of weakness, any kind of vulnerability when it comes to the teaching and the truth of what you are. Outwardly, of course, we remain vulnerable. But inwardly, we take a very strong stand. I am Atma, I am the non-dual self. So that Shraddha is what is always emphasized by Bhagavan. Whatever a person thinks himself to be, he becomes that. As they say in English, as you think, so you become. Yad bhavam tad bhavati, we say in Sanskritam also. So as we think, we become. That Shraddha is so significant, which is why in the teaching of non-duality, the Guru's role is vital. So what the disciple has to do is, he has to say, when the Guru is saying that I am Brahman, I need to set aside my beliefs. Remember, these beliefs that I am small, I am limited, I am insignificant, these are just beliefs. There is no logical truth to them when analyzed. When analyzed, we discover all our suffering is born of wrong beliefs. It is born of avidya, which is a very deep-rooted cause giving rise to all these wrong notions. That I am small, I am insignificant, I am suffering, I need this to become happy, I need that to become happy, I am miserable. All of these notions are merely beliefs without any logical basis. They cannot stand scrutiny. And so Bhagavan therefore emphasizes this idea, Shraddha Mayo Ayam Purushaha. Man is of the essence of what he believes himself to be. And so by asserting the truth of the Guru's teaching, by setting aside my own wrong notions, allowing the Guru's vision of me to come forth, I become free. So the way the Guru sees me, I learn to recognize myself as that. The Guru sees me that Aham Brahmasmi, he says Tattvamasi, or you are the self, as Bhagavan says. I too learn to see myself as the truth of that. It's no longer merely belief here, seeing that as a very truth which cannot be refuted. So that Shraddha is so critical here. So Shraddha Mayo Ayam Purushaha, a very significant phrase in the Bhagavad Gita. There's one more very nice verse. Proceeding along the path of sadhanas, various sadhanas. First the teaching of Atman, then the sadhanas related to the Atman, which is the 19th shloka, which says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhiyogam tam yena ma upayanti. So Krishna therefore continues about this idea of buddhi yoga. He says, look, to abide as a self, there's an important stage or important preparatory discipline where the mind is ready to receive the teaching of the Guru. That is known as buddhi yoga. So Krishna says to Arjuna that, look, even if you ask me Brahmajnana, I want Brahmajnana, I cannot give it like I can give somebody a sweet, or I can give somebody some object. So Brahmajnana is not an object. It is already the truth of what you are. What I can give you is a prepared state of mind. I can lead your mind to become a little more prepared. Then it is for you to own up the knowledge. It is for you to assert what you are. So, but buddhi yogam dadami. Dadami means I give. So Krishna says, I can give, and I can, as a boon, even give this preparedness of mind, buddhi yoga. Yenama mupayante. By that buddhi yoga, you can move towards knowledge. But knowledge is something that comes only by the upadesha of the Guru, which is understood by the disciple. Jnana cannot be therefore given as an object. People sometimes imagine that someone just touches somebody on the head and they get the jnana. So, well, all they mean is it gives them the preparedness. So we should retranslate such incidents, such miraculous incidents between gurus and disciples told in so many books, and say, look, all a guru can give is he can make the sishyas' mind a little free, a little quiet. And that quiet, prepared mind can then discover knowledge by owning up the truth of Aham Brahmasmi, that I am Brahman. So knowledge that I am Brahman cannot be given like that. Only preparedness of mind can be given. The knowledge is only for one who chooses to know. So it's like if I go to Ishvara, let's say the all-powerful cosmic intelligence, and say, oh Lord, please give me a head on my shoulders. I desperately want one head, just one head, I need it on my shoulders. Ishvara will only smile. He will say, look, I can give you good sense, and then you will accept and understand you already have a head on your shoulders. Even Ishvara cannot give the boon saying, I want a head on my shoulders, even though he's omnipotent. He can only give a clearer, sounder mind, and then, aha, eureka. I already have a head on my shoulders. It's not something I need to acquire afresh. That jnana then arises from within me. So that's the only way jnana works. Similarly, Ishvara cannot just press Brahmajnana onto you like that. He says you're already Brahman. He can only give that preparedness of mind. He can guide you in that direction. His presence will itself quieten the mind. That is the beauty of the Guru's presence and guidance. So that is conveyed here. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti. So by that buddhi yoga, I am attained. Ma upayanti. They attain to me. Meaning they attain their understanding of oneness with me. So this is the 19th shloka which Bhagavan had selected. So continuing this flow of sadhanas prescribed as a build-up leading to Atmajnana, Bhagavan then selects one very nice shloka saying, Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu para buddhihi yo buddhehe paratastu saha. So this is a whole hierarchy. How what you are experiencing is brought into a certain logical structure. So it's often assumed that, jnana has to be very simple. Of course, jnana is simple. I am Brahman, non-dual. All that exists is just consciousness. But then our minds are not so simple. Our minds have tied themselves in so many knots. So many questions are there. So many assumptions are there. So therefore, some structure is required to bring a method in the madness of the mind. Which is why many of the acharyas, many of our scriptures, they bring some structures, they use some words. These are not to add to our burden of ideas and concepts, but to bring some method into the madness that is already there. If I already have 100 different, let's say, wrong notions, well, if I were to adopt the jargon and the words being taught in the Upanishad, in the Bhagavad Gita, those 100 different confusions will come down to just 10. Much lesser, and then that can be easily dealt with. So that is why here these different words are used. Indriyani paranyahu. So when whatever you're experiencing at this moment consists of this succession of realities. There are indriyas, your sense organs. Indriyani paranyahu, indriyabhyah param manaha. Now behind these organs of perception or organs of action even, there is a mind, which is sankalpa vikalpatmika. So Sankalpa Vikalpatmakam. So, which is of the nature of oscillation, which is of the nature of trying to waver, trying to weigh different alternatives. So, that is the mind. Much of what you experience passively, like some chattering in the mind, as we say, all that is manas. So, you're not actually thinking much consciously, not very conscious there. A certain unconscious thinking is just keeping on in the background, that noise, that chatter, that mental chatter, that self-talk, all of that is more at the level of manas. Then manasastu para buddhihi. So that's a very important thing. If you're able to see in yourself that, look, behind this chatter, there is a buddhihi, consists of the deepest part of what you think yourself to be. That's where the Shraddha part comes in. So that's where what you believe yourself to be, what you believe is important for your happiness, what you believe is important in the world around you. All of those beliefs, those notions, deep-rooted notions are in the buddhi. If you change the buddhi, the person is entirely transformed. That is the greatness of Bhagavan and other gurus. Because when you come to the presence of Bhagavan, a deeper change in the buddhi starts taking place. Very subtly, but it happens. There's an interesting anecdote where James, I think Chadwick. Yes, it was all, probably one of the other devotees. He says he comes here to Bhagavan expecting a miracle to happen, that, oh, he'll get this nice experience of the self, he imagined something. And he would go and practice meditation before Bhagavan for many days. And then he had some other responsibilities and he had wound up those things. He was in a position to really kind of lead a quieter life. And day by day, he was expecting Bhagavan will show some miracle. He will show some very nice experience for me. And the days passed, nothing happened. The days passed, nothing happened. 6 months passed, he just looked back and he saw, although no miraculous experience happened for him of eyes closed and plunging into samadhi, nothing happened like that. But he found he was a totally transformed man. All that mattered to him now was entirely different from what mattered 6 months back. All that was real, what made him happy was entirely different. He discovered so much peace and happiness and contentment after that 6 months of staying here. He realized Bhagavan's magic had worked at a very subtle level. So it's not like some miraculous experience suddenly comes, but a gradual, like the dew falling, a gradual experience comes in, transforming the person, because the buddhi changes. The deepest part, manasastu para buddhi, changes by the grace of the Guru. More than any experience, that is what really we all are looking for, we need. And yo buddhe paratastu saha. So when the buddhi is clear and pure, meaning prepared, then the jnana happens. Paratastu saha means more than the buddhi is the self, which is the very truth of the buddhi. So when the buddhi is changed, it becomes more in tune with the guru, self-knowledge arises that I am the self, I am not even the buddhi, but I am that which is the illuminator of the buddhi. I am that awareness which is like the sun illuminating all that exists. That knowledge can arise. Yo buddhehe paratastu saha. That Brahman, that is the truth of the self, is even more inner to you than the buddhi. It's more fundamental to you than even the buddhi. So this is the flow, the teaching of what you are, where you stand, and how to go forward. That teaching is gradually unfolded through these verses. So we'll complete the next verses in the next session, which will be the final session of the Bhagavad Gita. Next Sunday, I presume, as Anurag ji said, is the penultimate session. So we will have one more session, and with that we will be completing our summary of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will see that in the next class. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnah Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you, Anuragji. You can take over.
Raghavji, thank you so much for another wonderful session. We have a question on the YouTube channel from a devotee, Germana Di Paolo. I shall read the question. Quote, Viparita bhavanas and Vishya vasanas in the teachings of Shankara and Bhagwan can be considered similar? And she's complimenting, saying, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Please consider to help us in the future. Unquote.
Yes, so that's an important question because just to give you a little context about the question, one of the challenges many of the students of Advaita face is that in different texts, even within the Adi Shankara tradition, different words are used for what's essentially the same thing. For example, what is called buddhi in one place will be called as something else in another place. What is called ahankara is sometimes taken together with the buddhi and so on. So the words have to be seen very contextually. And once you know the context, then there won't be any confusion. But we should not upfront take a word and assume that the same word means the same thing in different texts or by as used by different teachers. Okay, so just you should keep this in mind. But once you get the big picture, there is no confusion. It's all very, very clear. For whatever reason, each teacher, gives answers, which Arthur Osborne uses a very nice word. He says, there all answers of Bhagavan are very much ad hominem. He uses that sentence ad hominem. The word ad hominem means it is in keeping with the questioner in front of you. So we say in traditional Advaita, we say the adhikaritvam is to be seen, is to be kept in mind in answering any question. So Bhagavan always customized his replies. The same topic, the same question, he might respond differently. And same goes for the other acharyas like Adi Shankara and so on. So they've used different words slightly differently in different contexts. So to come back to this question here, the word vasanas are generally used by Bhagavan to refer to that which is an obstacle at the subtlest level. So Bhagavan says that, look, you have had this blessing of Advaita in the form of Aham Spurana, and yet the vasanas will try to pull or sort of make you lose that very awareness. And Bhagavan says, even Arjuna says, Nashto moha spritir labdva, etc. I have lost my moha. And then later on, he forgets the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna again reiterates the teaching. So in this way, Bhagavan says the vasanas will be obstacles to us. They will tend to obstruct us from spontaneous abidance as the self. So Bhagavan uses the word vasanas as the last obstacle, which are going to be there even after the Aham Spurana, even after great clarity and conviction about Advaita. Now, in the traditional Shankara, way of explaining the same truth, Shankara and his other later disciples, they use the word viparita bhavanas. Viparita means opposite. Bhavanas are tendencies or emotions, we can say, or habitual thinking patterns. So these viparita bhavanas are the last obstacle. Now the question is, so these vasana word used by Bhagavan, can we conflate or can we just kind of equate it with the viparita bhavana? Simple answer, yes. They are in this context the same, not in other contexts. Vasanas can mean so many other things. There are infinite vasanas. If we start having to deal with all the vasanas, there's no end to it. It's like a samsara. It's another never-ending process of never getting to the jnana. It becomes an asymptotic journey. You never get to the destination. Here, it's not like that. The vasanas slash viparita bhavanas here, luckily, are only a limited set which have come to us in this janma, which are unfolding as a result of the early childhood and other prarabdha. Once they are dealt with, there are no obstacles to Brahmajnana. And so we have to see that the word vasana, therefore, has a limited meaning in this context. Only a few vasanas, that's the good news, we have to deal with. And once they are dealt with, the jnana is sahaja or natural. But the word vasana is also used in other contexts to mean the infinite vasanas of infinite janmas. Some of them are lying unexpressed in the sanchita karma. Some of them are expressed, but then the word vasana can mean, oh my God, there are so many vasanas, and this vasana has been born of millions of janmas. How can such a strong vasana be dealt with in one life? It's a logical question, but the answer is no. It's not like there are infinite vasanas. It's not even like the vasana which is born of infinite janmas is impossible to deal with, not at all. The vasanas can be dealt with within a deterministic time span by abiding as the self, as nididhyasanam or anspurana, because only a limited part of it has manifested in this particular upadhi or the mind. So that's where we have to thank our limitedness. See, my mind is limited, so it has only limited problems. And it has only limited vasanas, which are my obstructions. In an unlimited mind, okay, there will be maybe unlimited problems as well. So, like I said, therefore, the vasanas and viparita bhavanas are synonymous in this context. They are very limited in scope, but they are there, they are real, we have to deal with them. And that's the way Bhagavan uses the word vasanas as the last obstacle which prevent the spontaneous abidance. So I think that clarifies your question.
Raghavji, thank you so much. Germanaji is expressing thanks and gratitude for your response on the YouTube channel. So thank you. And we shall, of course, meet you again next week and take the session further.
That will be the concluding session of the Bhagavad Gita.
Sure, sir. Sure. I would now request Narayananji to initiate Aksharmanamalai and Arati. Narayanji.
Karunarunamani Irinavali Nigan Karumaksharamana Madhumalai Tirunadiya Tiru Adiyar Tirumara Teliya Parabudal Porulaga Karunagaramuni Ramanariyan Muva Gainal Shuliyadi Gadiyaga அருணாச்சலமென அகமே அறிவோடும் ஆழ்வார் சிவனுலகு ஆழ்வாரே அருணாச்சலமனற்கேற்ற அக்ஷர மணமாலை சாற்ற கருணாகர கணபதியே கரம் அருளி காப்பாய் அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சலம் என அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகந்தை வேறறுப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா அழகு சுந்தரம் முன் அகமும் நீயும் அபிநமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ Arunachala, Arunachala Shiv, Arunachala Shiv, Arunachala Shiv, Arunachala. அகமுகுந்தீர்த்துள் அகமுகை சிறையாய் அமர்வித்ததென்கொல் அருணாச்சலா. ஆருக்காயனை ஆண்டனை அகற்றி தினம் பழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலம். இப்பழித்தம் உனையே நினைப்பித்தாய் இனி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா. ஈன்றிடும் மன்னை பெரிதருள் புரிவோய் இதோ உனதருள் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுலத்தின் மேல் உருகி இருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. ஊர் சுற்று உளம்பிடா உன்னை கண்டு அடங்கி உன் அழகை காத்தருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. என்னை அழித்து ஓ என்னை களவாவிடில் இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா. ஏதிந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறர் இழுக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. ஐம்புல கள்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போல் அகத்தில் நீலையோ அருணாச்சலா. ஒருவன் உன்னை ஒளித்தவர் வருவார் உன் சூதே இது அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. ஓங்காரம் பொருள் உயர்வில்லை உனையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா. அவ்வை போல எனக்குள் அருளை தந்து என்னை ஆழ்வது உன் கடன் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷர மணமாலை வாழி. பூஜ்ய சமர்த்தம் நாகவல்லி தெளிவுதம் கற்பூர் சூழ்த்தம் தந்தாம் दीपार्थं समर्पयामि दीपार्थं समर्पयामि अक्षरां समर्पयामि. ओम भूर्भुवस्सुः स्वधर्मवर्ण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्। सत्यम दर्शन प्रसन्नामि अमृतस्त्वं स्वाहा ओम प्राणे स्वाहा अपाने स्वाहा ध्याने उदाने स्वाहा समाने स्वाहा ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा। अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः। कात्याय मुरुगा वल्ली दैवाय नमः। सुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। स्वामीनाथने नमः। दक्षिणामूर्तिये नमः। नटराजने नमः। भैरवरे नमः। नंदीमहेश्वराय नमः। शिव पार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय 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 नमः। उरगन लड्डू कदलीपழம் அதிரசம் नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि। मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि। अमृतोपतां सूत्रामसं समर्पयामि। नीराजनं समर्पयामि। नीराजनानन्तरं आसमनीयं समर्पयामि। पूगीबल समायुक्तं नागवल्ली तलयोर्धं कर्पूर्ण स्वर्ण संयुक्तं प्रयुक्तं कर्पूर नीराजनं श्रीरमण महर्षिः समर्पयामि। भगवान सबका रक्षा करे। भगवान फूल ले लो। यो भान पुष्पं वेद पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पुष्पवान् भवति। चंद्रमा वावान् पुष्पं पुष्पं पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पद्मान् भवति। ओम तत् ब्रह्मा ओम तत् वायु ओम तत् आत्मा ओम तत् सत्यम ओम तत् सर्वम ओम तत् पुरो नमः। अन्नतर् भूदेश गुहायां विश्वमूर्तिषु त्वमेघ्नस्तं वसत्कारस् त्वम् इन्द्रस्तं रुद्रस्तं विष्णुस्तं ब्रह्म प्रजापति। ओम तदातु आपो दत्तिर्स्वं दुर्मनुस्वरम् न कर्मणा न प्रजयादने विज्ञाने एके अमृतत्वमानसु परेण नाहं नीतं गुहायं विप्राजते दत्यदयो विसन्ति। वेदांत विज्ञान से नित्यदार्थ संन्यास योगा तदय शुद्ध सत्वा ते ब्रह्मलोके तु परान्नकाले सुभाषित्यं यो वेदातो स्वरप्रोक्तो वेदान्तस्य च प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य परसमहेश्वरः मन्त्रपुष्पं समर्पयामि। ॐ तत्सत् हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। यानि यानि सपावानि देवानि च तानि तानि प्रणक्षन्ति प्रदक्षिणं वन्दे
Namo Ramana. This brings us to the closure of today's satsang with Raghavji. We shall meet Raghavji again next Sunday at the same time. Namo Ramana.